For Painel 2, Ética, o olhar das instituições, call out to the stage Inês Godinho as the moderator and the speakers, Jeroen, van der Hoven, Mark Bale and Dafna Feinsold. Please.
As we are running a little bit behind already while the technicalities are being set up, I will start my role so that no flight is missed and that we can all have the pleasure of listening and debating with you. So, of course, moderating a session with renowned experts on something we all have, as the President said, the brain, at least all of us should have. It's a hopeful affirmation, but in fact, very few of us know. So, particularly my neurons are eager to learn with all three of you, but it's now my pleasure to present Jeroen van der Hoven, who is university professor at Delft University of Technology, and also the director of the Delft Digital Ethics Center. He's the founding editor-in-chief of the journal Ethics and Information Technology, and has been serving as a permanent member of the European Group on Ethics, EGE, to the President of the European Commission, and also as a permanent member of the Ethics and AI High-Level Expert Group of the World Health Organization. So, because with this presentation it is clear why my neurons are so happy to hear you, I give you the floor. Please, you have 20 minutes.
Thank you so much. Perhaps we have some time for questions because I apologize up front. I need to switch this on. Up front that I have to leave after this, so that if we have time for questions, then it would be really great. I will be talking about, and it's a wonderful presentation, thank you so much, it's so very helpful. This will be an ethical appraisal of what we are witnessing, and we had so many good illustrations of, and the merger of artificial intelligence with neurotech and neuroscience, because that is, I think, giving us some reasons for concern, and I will speak to those. A lot of work has been done already, and I will divvy it up in this way. The lay of the land after some introductions, the lay of the land in public policy making, then the ethical issues proper, let's say the standard or the most obvious ones that you all probably know a lot about, and then the nature of a novel harm, a novel, I think, concern that we should address, and that has to do with the fact that we become a little bit, let's say, immodest about what we know about other people because we have so much of the knowledge and the data and the insights that neuroscience is now producing with the help of artificial intelligence. And I put that under the rubric of epistemic hubris, or epistemic immodesty, and it's something that we have to, I think, be very much aware of, and then I end with some recommendations. But up front, to be open about what concerns me most, are two things. Apart from all the other things that we will be mentioning and that you will have time to discuss in greater detail, that is not so much the wonderful work that has been presented by the previous speaker, because that falls clearly within the realm of good medical research that lives up to the standards that we have all over the years crafted and established and entrenched, and looking at ways to help people on the basis of that evidence-based medicine. So that is, I think, that goes without saying. I'm talking about the people who are seeing wonderful business opportunities and are very interested in a set of data that we all carry with us and give off all the time. That is our neuro or our brain data, because that is, I see that as the last frontier that they want to really get their hands on. And that is something of concern. So not much that good work we should carry on, and it's clear what the results will be. And we will probably also need the help from the business partners, but we should worry about how to regulate that, as you already indicated. The other thing is that when this scales to society and this becomes ubiquitous and everyone will be using it, taking it home, and we will get used to it, Then we may, depending on the applications that we're looking at, we may kind of jump to conclusions about who you are, what makes you tick, what kind of emotional state you are in, which level of arousal, etc. And we will begin to speculate, perhaps without any good evidence. And so when it becomes a feature in society, I think that is also something to worry about. Machine learning applied to neuro-big omics data, we have so much of that lying around, routinely gives rise to unjustified claims to know people and to attempts to predict and manipulate their preferences and behavior on that basis. Right? I think that is a thing. So, of course, it's good to define what we're talking about. I'm not going to in detail because it was also introduced by you. But I think important is to see whether in the middle that it is devices that are connected to the brain that pick up all kinds of information that is generated there and then analyzes it. And this is, I think, the shift that we're witnessing right now. This very, very powerful artificial intelligence that is modeled after our brain. We're talking about the same thing. You talked about learning and, well, that's actually how machine learning and deep learning learns, by rewards, etc. So actually we have a counterpart, but an artificial counterpart that is called in to make sense of the signals that we produce. So all kinds of distinctions are made. I'm not going into depth there, but it is useful to make those. What are we, especially when we're interested in regulation? Are we talking medical versus non-medical? Are we talking about invasive versus non-invasive versus minimally invasive? Or unidirectional or bidirectional? Or diagnostic, therapeutic, rehabilitative? Or supporting, augmenting, enhancing? Or sensory, which kind of functionalities are they applied to? So it's good to specify when you talk and have these discussions, that, what is what. And it's clear that, and the examples have been mentioned, these brain-computer interfaces can help to transform our work, creativity, education, experiences, enhance performance and productivity, boost concentration, relaxation, meditation, mindfulness. This is where the business will be, let's say, the low-hanging fruit, where you can introduce the wearables and the Fitbits, etc., the earplugs, etc. We'll have some examples of that. And deal with anxiety, stress, and attention disorders, and so much more. There's a huge installed base. All the examples have been in medtech, and that is wonderful. That's great. We should use that within certain kind of ethical frameworks and legal frameworks. But this is the thing that I was talking about, right? So this is, everyone is, embarking upon this race. China is leading the way, is doing a lot of work. I have regular contact with people who are neuroscientists in China, and they tell me what kind of experiments they are doing. It is that wouldn't be possible in Europe, I can tell you that. Yeah. Facebook, Elon Musk is not only doing Tesla and Starlink and Neuralink, but Musk is also preparing, allegedly, the introduction of a smartphone that is neuro-enabled. So these things are just around the corner. And of course, when you have your AirPods, your Apple AirPods, and they are picking up signals, although they may be weak, but the technology, the AI, is extremely powerful to pick up the signals in the noise, right? So I think there's a race for the brain harvesting neurodata, and they're looking for, sexy and interesting interfaces. So I can't see myself wearing that, but perhaps if you're part of a game console, then it could be cool. I don't know. But and there is this interesting ecosystem of science and research institutions, policymakers, industry. I give this as an example. It's a kind of a little bit of an obscure is perhaps a slightly tendentious kind of label, but there is this kind of mix of people running around this, dancing around this neurotech and AI. That also is, so the policy landscape, and we have some representatives here. UNESCO is doing wonderful work. You will tell more about that. I'm not going into the details. I've seen the drafts that were circulated for consultancy to consult with other parties, and it's great great work. That also, by the way, is a lesson for us as EGE, the European Group on Ethics, is going to advise the European Commission on that. Don't reduplicate that work. Don't repeat the work. It's wonderful work. We should just make good use of it, summarize it, and just look for what needs to be done. Same for the WHO, the OECD, the Council of Europe, all wonderful reports. It's just an illustration of how much effort is being made right now. And we all are on the same page with this respect. We know that this is going to be hugely important. So we have to pay attention with what's happening right under our noses, and at the same time look ahead at what's coming. So, so these two are coming in the Q1 of 2025. So what are these ethical issues? Of course, there are the obvious standard ones. You go to your medical ethics textbook 101, you just, on the table of contents, this is what's there. If you dive a little bit deeper, it could be about the risks of implantation, explantation. We already had the first case of an explantation because the software was no longer supported. The company was broke, and so you have to sort. Although the patient benefited a great deal from that, it had to be explanted. So irreversible damage to the brain tissue, hemorrhages, electromagnetic interference with all the smart environment appliances that are around. The long-term effects are unknown. We need constant monitoring, post-marketing surveillance of all of this. Then there's the equity and justice issues that you already mentioned. And if this is going to be hugely helpful to people and it can better their condition, then we must make sure that everyone has access to it. But we can see what could happen, and that's called, I've called it here in scare quotes, facelift dynamics. If everyone in my, in my office has a facelift and I don't, I look a little bit, old, so I have to, and it's the, and that is called a positional arms race, right? So we see a lot of those positional arms races going on, and they're, from a collective or societal point of view, they're wasteful because we're just investing. I have to look a little bit better. I have to have a newer car than you have, right? So if, like with ChatGPT, I can't afford not to use it. Many people report around me, let's say, I can't afford to not use it, and therefore I need access to it because I can turn out stuff that is fairly good quickly. So that I think is something that we need to bear in mind, that the small differences in these cognitive advantages or enhancements, if they are coming, could make the big difference, right? So if I have access to one database more than you have, although you have access to pretty much everything, but it's just, that's the value adder. That will make the small difference, will make the big difference. The person who runs 1/1000th of a second faster on the 100 meters will get all the sponsor contracts. So it's introducing a kind of positional arms race where the small difference makes the big difference, and that gets us landed in a, let's say, winner-take-all situation. And there may be vast societal impacts. Let's say the ring of Giges, right? The ring of Giges is this ring that makes you invisible. Suppose everyone would be invisible. Right? That would change the way we organize our societies. And so what if we could have access to each other's mental states, feelings, moods, etc. That would change the way we relate and interact with each other. You always have to ask the question, this is a great technology, what if everyone would have it, right? If that would scale throughout society. So that's I think, we have seen that with ChatGPT now. We have seen it with social media. In the beginning we thought, oh, well, that's nice to have run on my phone. And now it is like, say, it's really shaping a future society. We have grown up, we're raising our children with social media, and Commissioner Vestager, the former Commissioner for Digital Affairs, remarked upon the introduction of ChatGPT and large language models, he said, if we go back 20 years in time and think of when we introduced social media in society, we would have done that differently, right? Now looking at the negative consequences for society, and now with ChatGPT and large generative AI, we have the same problem. We have to pay attention. I predict that this is the same with neurotechnology. So this is a moment in time where we really have to reflect. On privacy, data protection, those are the obvious ones, and individual freedom. Privacy, freedom, and autonomy, of course we have to study, is our policy and regulation up to snuff? Is it fit for purpose? Can it accommodate neurodata, etc.? And so all of the issues that are privacy. But I want to move to a second point, the more philosophical point, before I close off. And this is to do with our worst nightmares in this space. What are our worst nightmares? Well, a letter of concern by 40 sleep researchers, the best in the world, about targeted dream incubation. So that is steering the dreams of people through your speaker or your smartphone on your bedside table. This can only be done if you have machine learning, if you have deep learning, and you do a lot of experiments, right? So advertising in dreams is coming. This is a letter published already in 2021. So this is the targeted dream incubation, and guess what? It's a beer company that has really invested in this. They want to make you dream about cold beers, and they plan to do this the evening before the big soccer or whatever game, right? So that's what they were thinking of. This is something I recently saw. I'm also part of a group that thinks about the regulation of military AI. So these soldiers of the Australian Army are connected through a brain-computer interface with the robo-dog. Right? So they can steer the robo-dog that's in their team to accompany them, to carry their luggage, but also, if the payload is different, to fire a weapon. Of course, this has already been long been done. The results are getting better. This is what you're looking at the top row, and this is what the computer predicts that you're looking at. That's also pretty good. And these are future developments: brain-to-brain interfaces, of course, and cross-species connection. Here's a guy who wiggles the tail of a rat just by thinking about it. So this is cross-species connections. So the digital technology is getting under our skin and into our heads. And I'm worried about these kind of comments. This is Gus Hunt, the former CTO of CIA, 2013. He said, it is really very nearly within our grasp to be able to compute on all human-generated information. Right? So this is Eric Schmidt, Google. We can suggest what you should do next, what you care about. Imagine we know where you are and what you like and more or less what you think. So that is the kind of the posture, that's the approach, and of course this explains why people are so eager to get to those, the last trove of data. That's brain data. So that may induce a kind of hubris that we know so much about people. We have so much data and models on people, we think we know them, and we know them even better than they know themselves. And there's hence the immodesty. So how do we respond to this epistemic hubris in a digital age? I think it pushes us, and we have seen this in the past, the technology pushes us to revisit and rethink and recalibrate our key moral concepts. And I think we have to do that with privacy, and in order to understand better what may already have been there, but needs to be formulated even sharper and more precise. So these are reasons why we protect our data. And this is the reason why in Europe we talk about data protection. We have moral reasons to protect data. We don't want people to be harmed. We want them not to be exploited in a market for data, where data is money, right? So we want them not to be discriminated, where information from one context from my doctor's office is then sold to a commercial firm, right, and used for completely different purposes. That we think that is not fair, and that is a violation of contextual integrity, as it's been called. And I want to focus now on this fourth moral reason to protect data. Is respect for moral persons and moral autonomy in a very specific sense. And I think we are now able to formulate what that specific sense is because of the technology that we have now. That prompts us, that forces us to think even harder about the things that we're already thinking hard about, but still need to do more. So you know this guy probably. This is, yeah, that's, I want to show Sting. Yeah, okay, so I've answered myself. And he has a nice song, and the song is, Zip About Me. So lay my head on the surgeon's table. I'm not going to sing this for you, but lay my head on the surgeon's table. Take my fingerprints if you're able. Pick my brains, pick my pockets, steal my eyeballs, come back for the sockets. Run every kind of test from A to Z, and you still know nothing about me. Right? How can that be? Yeah. This is actually I collated. If you have good suggestions, I collate these lyrics songs, and I found many. Those songs have this theme. Elizabeth Gillies, there is so much more to me than you think you see. Right? Ray Charles has a song. And so you think you know me, but you don't know me. But of course the strongest expression is Sting's lyrics. How can Sting claim that if we use all data collection techniques at our disposal, all omics data, 20 years of clickstream behavior, everything, you know, all your biomarkers, everything on a person, and we still end up knowing nothing about that person? Can't be literally true. It's a paradox, but we do understand what he means. Right? So there is something that escapes us, and that is what in philosophy of mind we have called the phenomenal consciousness, or the experience of having being in a conscious or mental state. And that has proverbially become named after 2 more minutes. What is it like to be a bat? Right? So that's we don't know. We don't know exactly what it is like to be a bat. I don't know what it's like to be you. So there is always something that it's like to be you, and that's inaccessible to others. And you have an epistemic privilege to say, no, you're wrong about that. Right? So I can make all kinds of hypotheses or predictions, but there's still your privilege to say you're wrong about that. That qualitative aspect. It's knowledge by acquaintance. I am acquainted from the inside subjectively with my mental states, and they can be described exhaustively. Let's say, suppose that neuroscience has ended, exhaustively from the outside, but that's knowledge by description, as Bertrand Russell pointed out. And so this subjectivity, as has been in the privacy literature, should not be neglected. It's crucial for it sits at the interface of our crafting our own identity and the shaping of social society. It's the space you need between those two places. I am a project, I want to be a certain person, society tries to shape me in a particular way. There needs to be a space, an arrière-boutique, Montaigne says, an arrière-boutique where you can retreat and you can think and craft yourself. Quite completely free from the. So individuals need to be able to define themselves and to have their subjectivity respected. That is inaccessible from the outside, right? And there are a couple of very good philosophers that would perhaps be surprised to find themselves in a presentation on neuroscience. But I think what they said, what they remarked, was very much to the point. Bernard Williams, one of the biggest philosophers, moral philosophers of our age, he said there is something like moral identification. If you respect someone in the age of big data and AI and the wonderful neurotechnologies and the way we can see and probe your mind and read your mind, that we have to acknowledge that there is an internal perspective, and that we have to acknowledge that, and we have to respect it, and we have to take it on board in how we interact with that person. He says that each man and woman is owed an effort at identification that he should not be regarded as the surface to which a certain label can be applied. But one should try to see the world, including the label, from his point of view. A point of view which is concerned primarily with what it is for him to live that life. So that is, and a very interesting, other philosophers said, so what we owe to people is to look at the total evidence. The total evidence includes their subjective appraisal of the state of being where they're in. The total evidence is not characterized in terms of big data, however intricate and however elaborate. and predictive analytics, but in terms of subjective mental states, higher order mental states, and reactive attitudes. I will skip Gabriel Marcel, with apologies to the French colleague, but he already said it, so we are aspirational projects. Is his book Homo Viator. Human beings are on their way to becoming something. So my neuroscience qualification or scientific studies freeze me in this particular moment, but they don't see that I'm doing this but aspiring to or dreaming about another life or a different future. So that is very difficult to capture because it's layer upon layer on layer. So this other guy interestingly says that there are these higher mental states are very, from a moral point of view, very important. I could be thankful to you, but I could be proud that I'm thankful. So I feel this gratitude towards you makes me proud. But at the same time, I'm ashamed that I feel proud about being grateful. So and 5 layers up, right? So how would you ever, from a moral point of view, let's say to really assess what the quality of your gratitude is, that is important. For our moral assessment of people, it is very important. But it will be left out in any kind of neuroscience or ChatGPT rendering. The person is not only understanding herself always subjectively and at a higher levels, but with greater depth. I need 2 more minutes. Can I bleed a little bit into the discussion time? No, not 2. 4 minutes for discussion, okay. And this point I will end with this because it is hermeneutical justice, and I think it's a topic that is going to be very important, that we owe it to people to create a data or digital environment or science environment that allows them to make sense of their own experiences, because we want to accommodate them as the persons that I just described, that are always looking at higher levels of subjectivity, etc. Now, this should have consequences. If this bears any kind of, it does have any point, then it needs to be designed in. It needs to be part of the way we design our institutions, our science, our trials, whatever. And this is calling to mind the remark by Paul Nemitz. In order to strengthen Western liberal democracies in the age of AI and the core Trinitarian idea of the human rights, rule of law, and democracy, we need a new culture of technology, business development, which we call human rights, rule of law, and democracy by design. So these things like epistemic modesty or moral identification and hermeneutical justice need to be high-level design principles for how we design our institutions. That is, I think, what I can offer in 22 minutes to you. So thanks so much.
Thank you very much for your most interesting presentation. I think all our neurons are very happy to have heard you. In this idea of being unfinished beings on the way to something, in your case, in very short time to a plane. We will have around 5 minutes discussion. As perguntas também podem ser em português e serão traduzidas. 5 minutos para discussão. 2 perguntas muito curtas para haver tempo de resposta. Já temos ali uma inscrição. So we have a question already.
Yes, Mr. van der Hoven, my name is Peter Villax. In your fabulous talk, you concentrated on evil, worst dreams. President Mircea Petronev referred to sectarian economic and financial interests. It's very clear that you are driven by fears, and indeed, if Facebook ever got hold of our brain data, God protect us.
Yes.
There's no doubt about it. The problem is that your focus, and you represent the EU, for me, is that your focus is crowding out the efforts of companies that are ethically driven and moral value driven. There is such benefit, but you only talk about evil. How do you react?
That is not what I'm about. No. I think we need to make a distinction between the good actors, and there are many also in the private sector, many good actors. And we also, but they are the first probably to recognize that they need to be regulated. Often, for example, in the environmental issues or climate change, they beg for regulation because they want to be good, but how can they, they can't leave money on the table and can't compete with bad actors if it's not regulated for all. Right, so there are those, absolutely, and as already said, we need industry here because otherwise, especially in the Green Deal, but also here, we need business players, to think of clever solutions to our problems. But you're right. As an ethicist, you tend to lean towards, the darker side of life. I'm still an optimist. I'm receiving treatment for that right now, but. Yeah.
So we have another question here at the front.
So first of all, a brief comment about my own speech, and I would say that there are already.
Same applies for me.
Yeah. Just to say that there are so many people talking about the positive issues that someone has to talk about the others. And the people that talk about the benefits in a very optimistic way are indeed the ones that have to gain from that, such as industry, enterprises, and others. So we have a lot of very positive speeches already. We need some criticism, and then we have a balance between both of them. So it's not that philosophers talk only about negative points, but they at least unveil that they are the dark sides of the moon also. And my question is quite along this topic. How can we, what kind of resources, what kind of means, what kind of strategies do we have today to ensure that those interests that are commercial interests, financial interests, political interests, scientific interests, and so on and so forth, what kind of strategies, means, ways of acting currently, or do we need to invent others, that create that balance between the benefits, not for few, but for humanity overall, and also to prevent the dangers that exist, and we have to be aware of them. So how to prevent those dangers, and how to create mitigation measures for the negative aspects that we cannot really eliminate.
Yeah. Now, this is a key question, and we had the opportunity to discuss over lunch. I think the European way that is always advertised by Macron as the third way, the European way, it's between China and the United States. So it's market or it's surveillance society. We have, two anchor points, that is the Charter of Fundamental Rights and the European Convention of Human Rights. And everything we do in science or in industry or in civil society needs to be positively related and accommodate those kind of building blocks of our European society. So we have to solve our problems, and we have to help people with medical conditions, and we have to do a good job there. But at the same time, we have to honor and respect these fundamental values. And this puts us in this very difficult bind, but the experience teaches us that sometimes when you are confronting those values in tension, I have to do this and I have to do that, privacy versus security, you can think of something clever that is a real innovation that allows you to serve both. And there are many, many good examples, and the first that comes to mind is privacy-respecting technologies. This is a big product in Europe, and what it does is it allows us to use computers, very powerful computers, and obfuscate identities, or use synthetic data, or do machine learning on homomorphically encrypted data, or, there are all kinds of very interesting solutions, but you will only think of those when you're not kind of resigning and saying, oh, sorry, then we will have to forget about privacy and do only this, or do privacy and forget about the business, right? So that's the interesting European approach is responsible innovation. Use the innovations for good, solve your problems, the problems that are widely shared in society that are huge problems, without violating. It's not a guarantee that we can always do this, but if the stakes are high enough, we have an obligation to try and see whether those solutions are available.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
We all wish
Apologies.
you a nice flight. We will carry on, as the saying goes, and the rest of this session will be a little bit different than the first part, because, as you all understood, there was a plane to catch. So we will have first the two interventions and finally the joint debate over the two sessions. So it is now my pleasure to present Mark Bale. Mark Bale has a vast experience leading the government policy in the intersection between research, healthcare, ethics, and his range of work includes several pieces of legislation that go from disruptive technologies to engaging with the public to patients, diverse stakeholders, and also he has served on several international bodies, including the EU, the OECD, the World Health Organization, UNESCO, the Council of Europe, and presently serves as a representative from the UK at the Council of Europe Steering Committee on Human Rights and Biomedicine. So, please, Mark, you have the floor.
Well, thank you very much for that kind introduction, for the chance to come here and represent the Council of Europe Steering Committee on Human Rights and Biomedicine. I feel like after these excellent two speeches before, I'm neither a sort of neurotechnologist, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a philosopher, so I'm giving you a kind of a policymaker's perspective on some work that we've been doing, and just to orientate a little bit about what we mean by what the Council of Europe does in this particular area, and I'll come back to why I think it's worth just exploring this, is we're very much responsible for the driving and the kind of dissemination of the Convention on Human Rights and Biomedicine, as it's called, or the Oviedo Convention for shortness, and that's a kind of well-recognised convention. It's over 20, I think it must be 25 years old now, opened for signature in 1997, negotiated in the mid-90s. It's probably one of the first and perhaps one of the only legally binding international treaties in this area around bioethics, biomedicine. And I think what we've understood over the time that we've been looking at this instrument and seeing how additional pieces of work and protocols need to be developed is that it's capable of being adapted. And I think we've explored in particular in the 20th anniversary symposium some of the new things that had emerged, or things that had both been thought of in a way but now had expanded, or they have converged between the convergence between technologies and the use of technologies that were seen as medical technologies increasingly being used in industry. So all of the things that we've heard from the excellent talk at the beginning are sort of things that we feel used to. But we did feel that there was a definite sense of areas that were converging and raising new issues. And neurotechnology was one of those ones that we decided to focus on when we developed the strategic action plan. That's a sense of trying to understand why we're doing bits of work. And this is the kind of high-level part of it. We have these three broad pillars around governance, equity, integrity. And also we have this sense underneath, which I think is really important in this field, about the importance of cooperation and communication. But we highlighted the importance of embedding human rights in the development of new technologies. And in particular, what we said in relation to neurotechnology were all of the things that we've heard about previously, that there were new developments in areas that allowed us to have both a kind of, if you like, a read and a write approach to data. You could read it and you could write it back. And also the sense of whether that raises brand new issues of privacy, around discrimination, So the Council of Europe decided to do a particular piece of work on this in parallel with, I think Dafna will talk about UNESCO's work, but also OECD did some work on responsible innovation in neurotechnologies. So I think what I would come back to now is a sort of quick run through a number of reports that are available or about to be discussed at our meeting next week. We're meeting in Strasbourg next week. And the first one was from Marcelo Ayenka, which was actually giving us a really interesting and detailed analysis of both the developments of neurotechnologies and the science, and maybe could do with some updating on the science, but also about the thinking behind some of the new rights that might, or the new challenges to human rights that might come from this. I mean, clearly we've heard these already from your own talk, but privacy, there was a new approach to privacy about not just understanding how data might be captured, but also about whether you can consent to data being captured that you don't know what it really means, the sense of a mental privacy. Autonomy, agency, responsibility. You know, are you really truly able to exercise this if you're interfacing between, if the interface between your thoughts and your actions is modulated through some other devices that we heard about this morning. And then, of course, most importantly, again, is around the sense of justice. You know, we are living in societies where there is huge inequity in access to therapies and treatments, and particularly if you start to look at some of these issues around equity and sort of start to ask the question, do people have the right to have enhancement? Do people understand a new right there? So these are all things that were flagged in Marcelo's report. What we've also identified from that are potential gaps, and these are areas that we still need to look at much more. You know, the sense of these technologies having come after instruments like the Oviedo Convention, and to some extent come after some of the major instruments like the General Data Protection Regulation, the EU, or the Convention on Data, which is the Council of Europe's convention. You know, have we sort of missed out on those? Are there some gaps that need to be filled in? And I think one other point as well that we rely on enormously in the Oviedo Convention is the sense of professional responsibilities, professional duties, and these are duties upon both physicians but also on the legal profession. And I'm not saying there are no equivalent self-regulatory models in sort of biophysical engineering or commerce and so on, but are there assumptions that we make in the Oviedo Convention that need to be re-examined in the light of new technologies, the kind of approach to commerce and the investments that are being made? So these are questions that were flagged up in the report that was developed by Marcelo. And really that came back to three potential areas of where you might say there were some potentially new rights. And as I said, I'm not a human rights lawyer, so I find this fascinating to listen to. I'm like a spectator at a tennis match, and I'm watching things being, whoa, that's a good point. But I think, you know, there are some interesting challenges that are emerging here. Freedom of thought, the sense of cognitive liberty, agency, free will, and so on. That's another really juicy philosophical area. Privacy in the sense of not just privacy of your data, but also privacy in your unconscious knowledge coming from your brain, or not just your voluntary knowledge, but your unconscious ones. And I think I'm not qualified, having heard Jeroen, to speak about that with any sense, but I do think there are some shadings into new areas of privacy there. And then again, coming back to a point I think we've heard mentioned before about the EU Charter of Fundamental Rights, the extent to which there is a sense of mental integrity, the right to mental integrity, to not have your thoughts interfered with and your perception changed. This was a report that was developed and written a few years ago, published, and used really as the basis for a significantly, it was challenging because it was just at the end of the lockdown period, so we were all online, but we held a round table, I think it was a round table, yes, a round table, about 2 years ago. And, you know, there were some really detailed experts on that roundtable, and I think the recordings are still available. But what came out of that was a very nicely written rapporteur's report, and it was a report that was overseen by the chairs of the groups, but also by our current chair, Professor Siobhan O'Sullivan. And it sort of, I think, is good because it lays out the arguments both ways in terms of whether there are new rights, what those new rights might look like, what the language you need to use on, in a sense that you can start to develop a normative framework. But I think the clear conclusion, in a way, it was that there was no consensus. There was no clear consensus that you would stand up, if you like, in a debating environment about that. Everyone recognised there were new ethical concerns here, but whether those could be translated immediately into new rights was a different question altogether. What, again, we didn't exactly try to avoid the problem, but we recognised that there were multiple different players in this field, and what we needed also to recognise was the importance of multi-level governance. The sense that we need to think about tools that we can develop, like guidelines and recommendations and soft principles, but also to start to have a dialogue with the funders of the research, with people who are practitioners and experts in the field. And then very much part of the Oviedo Convention is to start to have dialogue with the general public about the issues raised, what their values are, what their concerns are, and what their hopes are. And this is very much in line with the major Article 28 of the Oviedo Convention. So looking at taking this approach of three completely different strands, so if you like a legal one, a policy, landscape, a kind of engagement one, and a public dialogue. So those are the activities that we've been exploring. I may have skipped a slide. To start the work on the human rights frameworks, there's a report that was authored by Roberto Andorno from Switzerland. It's still in draft. We have yet to sort of effectively properly debate that. It will be debated next week, as I say, and it's probably, it's there. It's a very impressive report. But I think it again raises another level of complexity in terms of what the rights might look like. And I think, some of them I think are fairly standard in the approach you would take to a biomedical intervention around consent, but also raising issues around self-determination, the right to mental privacy, the right to a personal identity. All of these issues have been flagged previously. I mean, are they really truly rights? Are they issues that you could interpret? I mean, the way that the conventions work, the European Convention on Human Rights, the Oviedo Convention, is that cases eventually come to court, and the court considers the facts of the case and then comes up with judgments. Those judgments, in effect, become part of the interpretive framework for conventions. So, can you rely on the lawyers for cases to come forward? Is that too late, or effectively then have you already seen a harm being suffered? So we're sort of grappling with the best approach to protect rights, anticipate future uses, and also not to do what is sometimes called rights inflation, the sense of you're going to just generate another human right. So that's where we are at the moment. We're at the stage now, this will come back to the committee, the Steering Committee on Human Rights and Biomedicine in Health. I'm not sure how we're going to take the next step, but I think we've definitely identified the need for further legal discussion around these sense of new rights. I think we definitely need to do some work, and I think this is a great example around raising public awareness of the issues, starting to have a dialogue between experts and the general wider society. Working with other agencies, other international agencies, but also other advisory bodies at the national level is a key thing. And then something I'm particularly interested in, again, it's another element of the Strategic Action Plan, but it's now one of the major priorities for the Council of Europe, which is to engage youth in all the discussions. Because I think in this area, I mean, it's great to see there's a lot of young people in the audience, but in this area, I think a lot of these implications, a lot of these effects are going to affect younger generations before they'll affect people like myself and my generation. So really thinking about what the values are for younger people, what their hopes are and concerns, I think is a really important part. So that's the landscape as it currently stands in the Council of Europe's committee. A lot of very detailed analysis of the human rights implications, not many conclusions about whether there is a sort of new framework of rights and how best to capture those and get the language right, but I think the sense of anticipating and a multi-level governance is what we're aiming to do. And then just, if you want to have more information, I think copies of the reports, I mean, we can share the slides, but copies of the reports are on the Council of Europe's bioethics page. They are hopefully very helpful to understand the human rights framing of this, and we'll be following those up as the other reports are published and as the work that we're doing, probably not until sort of the next year or the year after, start to become clearer to us. We can update you, and I'm sure Maria, as the Portuguese delegation, will be able to do that as well. So hopefully that's a very rapid canter through and bringing us back, but I'm very happy to take questions on any of those points. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mark. We'll have the debate at the end. For now, it is my great pleasure, and thank you for keeping up with the time. I didn't have to show you the 2 minutes mark. Now we will have the pleasure to listen to Dafna Feinholz's clip. Although French-speaking Mexican by birth, so I think it was important to say that.
Mexican.
Is UNESCO's Chief of Bioethics and Ethics of Science and Technology, Division of Youth, Ethics and Sports at the Social and Human Sciences sector. She is a psychologist and a bioethicist by training, and was also a member of the Mexican Research Council and the director of the Women and Health Program in Mexico. So with this short bio, because I'm trying to shorten the bios as much as I can, so we can have as much time possible to debate, I give you the floor. It is a pleasure to hear you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. First of all, thank you very much for the invitation. I'm really happy and excited to be here. As Maria and Cynthia knows, I've always wanted to come to Lisbon, and for one reason or another was not possible. So I'm really happy, and particularly for this very important and interesting session. So honestly, I now don't know how to proceed with mine because it was built in such a way that many things have been said. But I also already have some new ideas that I want to share with you. So it will make my task easier, particularly at the beginning, because many of the things of the background have been said. Can we go to the other? And then I will then add some things that I didn't have planned to say, but that they are consequences of the previous presentations that are triggering some of my reflections. So in principle, this is what I wanted to talk to you, what are neurotechnologies, the application promises, risks, economical landscape, legislative initiatives, and then talk to you more about the UNESCO work, which is what we were asked to, like why UNESCO started to be worried about it and what is UNESCO going to do about it. So the first part is what has been already quite well addressed, but I just want to say, so, and of course here there are already experts, you and all your team and many others, but one thing that I will take the opportunity to say is that already in the recommendation that UNESCO is preparing, although I'm going to talk about it more at the end, you see that in there I only included technologies and devices that to observe, to intervene, and to modify the brain, and it's not only the brain, but it's also the whole nervous system. And I think it is important to think about it because all that has to do with the spinal injuries is part of what it's linked to neurotechnologies, and that's why I think we need to, although we are all to begin with fascinated with the brain, because the brain is what allows us to, but all the interaction of the nervous system is what allows us to be moral agents, to build our identity, to interact with others, to know who we are, what do we want. But it's really the combination of all the system and the interaction with the world that we live in, and that's why and the interaction with the life that we live in is part of the work of the brain, but also of the nervous system. Because if we cannot move, this interaction will be also very different. If we cannot speak, if we cannot express ourselves. But also because of the interaction between AI and neurotechnology that, thanks God, I don't have to explain because it was done marvelously before me. So in the recommendation, we are adding that it's not only devices and technologies, but also software and hardware, because here is where we including the role of artificial intelligence already embedded in the devices that we are using for that. I think this is what I wanted to say for this moment. And of course, we have already said about the consequences of this convergence of all these technologies, which is also including extended reality, biometrics that allow this prediction of individual behavior, health conditions, targeted interventions, access to mental contact and personal data, and real-time feedback tools. And everything this has been already explained, so I don't have to go into it. I wanted to also say something about this, which is the it's part of the context. And I think I want to go now back. I didn't know at which time to go back to your comment and about the responsibility, but I didn't know if to do it here or when I speak about UNESCO's, but what I want to say is that it's not only about responsible innovation or the third way. I think this is always about ethics, because ethics is about asking ourselves the questions, the basic questions like, do we need this technology? What for? Who is really behind it? Who will benefit? Who will be harmed? And who will be deciding who will be benefited? And who is going to decide who will be affected? And who will be defining the benefit and the damage? And that can only be a multidisciplinary, plural, and pluralistic from the different point of moral views that will have the answers and all the ones who are going to be affected by any decision. So for me, the third way is just ethics. And that's and that includes not only the pharmaceutical industry or anyone else, also governments, which allows some things to happen or use these technologies. And so we need to know that there are many thrives and many reasons why people want to develop some technologies, and this is why we need to start with. This is where ethics starts, and I think that's the role of ethics, and that's why it's so important, and that's why UNESCO is embarking in this, because UNESCO's role is to promote ethics in the development of science and technology. So we don't want to hinder innovation, we don't want to stop any progress, but we want to make sure that all the potential risks and benefits are taken into account, and that we want to make sure that these technologies are serving our purposes in terms of preventing infringements of human rights, in ensuring that the human rights are really being able to be in place, and then to make sure that we flourish. In the preamble of the recommendation says it's about human flourishing and also environmental flourishing, because technologies, any technology, also neurotechnology, has a huge impact on the environment, and we're not speaking too much about it, and it's part of the dark side. So I already said this. So from this, what I wanted to say is, of course, we just heard about the depression, and so very interesting and very telling videos and images, and all these promises about Parkinson. Well, I don't have to say anything because you saw, but I think that's really important. You know, Alzheimer is the 8th leading cause of death, and stroke is the 3rd. So that's why I think, and in fact, you know why I started with this? Because in my surroundings, everybody's speaking about the risks. So that's why I always start with the potential benefits. So it's the other way around. And so I just wanted to, and then I wanted to say something about this, is about sleep, because some experts were telling me that this is not technical, and you are more experts, but some of the ones that help us working on the draft, they tell me, this is nonsense. You cannot implant any idea during sleep to people. And the only thing that you do is you disturb their sleep. And it's a public health problem, because you are not allowing people to rest. And it's not. But if I don't know, when I was in high school, people used to sleep, you know, with a recording for the test for the next day. This was very common in my time. It's like, yeah, I couldn't study. I mean, I'm not. And so people were doing this, and people believed it. And it seems that it's still the belief today. And they told me there is no scientific evidence whatsoever that this is possible. But it is true that it's exploded. And if you go, you will see that there are enterprises selling, and there is a special brand of what to say, how to do with sleep. So this is happening, although it has zero evidence, even technical. And it was, as it was already mentioned, there is the medical use and the outside medical use, invasive, non-invasive, and of course we know that we have seen that with outside the medical realm is where we have more challenges. Why? Because there are no regulations, as has already been said, and it's because there is no such a culture of ethics. Like, I mean, there is no ethics committees in engineering. There is no ethics learned to. I mean, engineerings and the people that are working on computers and all these things, they are not taught in ethics. They are not taught about what the impact of what I'm developing will be, and there are no ethics committees to review. So there is a lack of all that. That's the vacuum that we have, and that's why it's important. But on the medical side, I want to say there are also a lot of ethical issues. It's much more regulated. We have much more guardrails, but at the same time, for example, I am really happy that you showed the video about the Parkinson, because one of the things when we said about personality, there are two things about the personality. There are two things that are very important. One is that we need to build to the idea of who we are, but these things which no one, starting from me, that I have an uncle with Parkinson, and I'm thinking like maybe he should be doing this. We want them not to be seen like this. But many of these people, also with depression and other things, when they have things into their mind, they feel they have problems with identity because they feel they are not themselves. They feel that they are depending on something that is in their brain. So they don't recognize themselves as the person they were and that the person they are now, and they are afraid of the person they can become if this stops functioning or if they are taken out. Or, as it was also said, if the company breaks and then they say, sorry. And that happened with people that didn't see, they were blind, they had these implants, and then they were extracted, and these people just went blind again. But that's another issue of health. So, and then on the military, I didn't say, but this is what I wanted to say about this one. So beyond health, it's not only so I think very, very important is the direct to consumer. I also agree this is one of the huge ones because of all the reasons that have been said, so I don't have to repeat these dependencies, these wrong decisions. But there is another very important problem, which is the information goes through third parties. When you go home with your EEG, and then, or your glasses, even one of the experts that was working with us was wearing these glasses that was said we all tried them on. I can show you the pictures, all of us tried because it does the eye tracking and the EEG and so many things. And like this, she says, I can know if I'm too tired, if I have to take a break, etc., etc. And that's really cool, right? But I mean, for her, and that's good. But what I mean is that information goes to a third party, which is, or whatever you want to call it. I don't want to mention any, but any of them could be. And they are keeping this information. And they are, and there was a study that to check about the confidentiality policies that these companies have. 29 out of 30, they don't have. And in 29 out of those 30, they said that they are the owners of this information and they can sell it. So it's not so that's why the direct to consumer is so delicate, and that's why we need to be so careful, because what and who is going to use this information that we are giving, which is the most personal information. What else I wanted to tell you, because I don't want to go on the same things. But you see, there is also in education and in labor. Let's not forget other applications and military applications. It is very, very, very important. In military, there is to enhance soldiers. It's for them to use exoskeletons, for example. There is technologies to try to see if people are telling the truth or not, if they are going to be, if they are guilty or not. In education is to follow up if the students are concentrated, and if not, then tell the parents directly. Or, for example, in labor, in work. So what happens? It could be very good, because if you are a bus driver, it's good that they know that you are about to sleep, because they can protect you and the people that are sitting in the bus. But it can also be used, and which is most probably then motivation, is to make sure that people are productive. And then what happens when they go out of the workplace? Are they going to still go with the wearables, and they are going to continue to collect information? So that's why there are other areas that we should take into account. Speaking about that, also, if you see, there is this one study of UNESCO where you can see how much investment has been done in innovation and also in publication. And also, not only, and of course, this is only about in about 6 countries on the north, basically. And you see also that there is a very unequal development and access. Only 10 countries generated over 80% of high-impact publication, and only 6 countries generated 90% of patents. So this is also, again, it has been referred to the equal access and social justice. The next one, please. And it's very interesting. I'm not going to stop here, just to show you on this side of the, I don't even know which side is it. I am a neurodiverse person. I really don't know which one is right. But the big square there is all the patents. But if you see, my slide is not complete, because there are many other, outside Latin America, many other initiatives for regulation. But look how many are in Latin America. So if you make the contrast between what I told you the previous slide about the investment and about the publication, and then you see how many initiatives to legislate in countries of the so-called global south, you see that there is a lot of interest and a lot of movement. So it's something that is not only for the rich countries. The next one. So that's why we have a committee which is called International Bioethics Committee, which in the year with Maria. Maria was a member. Were you? No, we were Paula da Silva is a member. No, with Maria we were together drafting the Declaration of Universal Bioethics and Human Rights. But so they devote a report every time to a topic. So this time we have another committee that developed a report on ethics of artificial intelligence. This one prepared this report on neurotechnologies, and this is what they found. The problems, and I'm not going to go into them again because they have been discussed, brain integrity and human dignity, identity and psychological continuity. I just gave you an example. The freedom of thought, which is really the most important, is that you are not obliged to reveal your thoughts, and they can be used without your consent in many ways. Mental privacy, accessibility and social justice, and there are also cross-cutting issues like discrimination, which goes very much linked also to the biases in the algorithms, the interest of the child and the adolescent, because you know that doing interventions in child's brain is something very delicate because it's in a developmental state, and informed consent, and in many, many, many ways. So I'm not going to go into that. So, as I said, the mandate of UNESCO is to develop, to make sure that science and technology is developed in this way. One of the advantages of UNESCO is that it is a global organization, so it's not regional. We have 196 countries, so everybody's voices are there. And then the UN, at the UN level, there was also this interest of having this, that UNESCO will play a role, and that's why we decided to go into to doing we were given the mandate to prepare a recommendation on ethics of neurotechnology. So I will use just a few minutes more just to give you what is the most important features of this recommendation. So first of all, it thinks about ethics as a systematic normative reflection based on a holistic, multicultural, multidisciplinary, pluralistic, and evolving framework of interdependent values and principles. This is something that needs to be evolving with the technologies. And it's the basis for the normative evaluation and guidance of neurotechnology with human rights as the compass. The next one, very important, the recommendation includes in the scope the data and, as I said, and the structure about the activity of the whole nervous system, but also that information that is collected outside the medical sphere. The recommendation also takes into account cognitive biometric data, which is data that is not collected from the classical neurodata biometric technologies, but this data can be processed and we can make inferences about mental states, and that's why the ethical issues are the same. Recognizes the neural data and the cognitive data as sensitive, and you know this is very important because this is for regulatory agencies. If they do not consider this as a personal and sensitive data, they will not be protected by law. Next one, please. We take into account the whole cycle of neurotechnology. I will be happy to share the slides so and also you can see the draft, so I will not go on all these details. And very briefly, just to finish, the recommendation has a number of values, principles, and rights, and also relevant areas of application, because the idea is not only to have values and principles, but then like where and how do you apply them and what do they mean. And also they cover, as I said, also now you will see. The recommendation, we are here, is also taking into account special end users like children, elderly, persons with physical disability, mental health, women and gender. And the next one, here you can see some of the values and principles. And I just wanted to say, to point one, if you see on the ethical principles, the third from down to up, epistemic justice, inclusive engagement, and public empowerment, which is much more in line with the hubris that we just heard about before. The next one, please. Where are we? So these are the areas of application. There are many things I wanted to say about research ethics, for example, the many things that you have to take into account, but I won't go into the details. The next one. The next one is, okay, the next one is this one. I will, if you want, I will leave this for, sorry, thank you. For questions, if you're interested in explaining to you how do we develop this recommendation, because it's very interesting, because it's really an inclusive process, but I will not explain now because of the time. And so just for you to know that the first draft, you can look at it at the website. Now, as it was mentioned before, we are waiting for member states to get their comments. And then next year in May, they will be the formal negotiation. And if member states agree, it will be approved in October. And we will have this recommendation on ethics of neurotechnology. We also have one on ethics of artificial intelligence. And here the last one is so you can have access to the two publications and the link where you can see the rest of the information. Sorry for taking more time.
So thank you very much for your presentation. It was very interesting and raised also a lot of questions, and the sequence between policy making and ethics recommendations is always interesting. I will just say one sentence in Portuguese. De novo, agora teremos cerca de 16 minutos para o debate, porque depois temos que fazer uma troca de mesas para efeito da sessão seguinte, para a questão do streaming. As perguntas podem ser feitas em português a quem não as quiser fazer em inglês. Haverá tradução para os respectivos palestrantes. So I ask, pergunto, are there any questions? One. I also have one, but... So, please.
Mark Bale, your focus is essentially technical, legal frameworks, the laws. The problem is that when we're having to invoke the law in the case of an infringement, we've already failed. A violation of the law, somebody's already been harmed. So focusing on the law, though very important, doesn't solve everything. And what I've heard here is that there's a lot of focus on new legislation. I think not. I know the GDPR extremely well. If I look at moods and thoughts, they're brain data. What is brain data? It's health data. Where is health data covered? Article 9 of the GDPR. Second point, legitimate purpose. It never would forcing a person to dream about a beer be considered a legitimate purpose. That's a violation of GDPR, completely. Third point, if I'm still trying to attempt to make people dream about beers, that is called clinical study with intervention. And that is regulated by every single law on clinical research in the EU and everywhere in the world. So please, no new laws. GDPR is amply sufficient to deal with this.
Thank you very much. So we have, I don't know if you want to answer immediately or at the end, so we will collect questions. There is another question here.
Well, my question for the two of you was about the criticism that we just heard, but that was my question even before you talked, the criticism towards regulation. Of course, that regulation is not exactly legal standard. We are talking about different things, because I am not talking about only law, I'm talking about regulations, that means a normative framework that is grounded on ethical values, the ones that are responsible for our own identity. So I'm not just talking about legality. But again, and this shows how much criticism there is, many scientists and enterprises, people that have strong interests on the development of as speed as possible of new technologies, usually say that there's a problem in Europe because North Americans create, China copies, and we regulate. I mean, we are sick and tired of listening to this slogan. Jeroen talked about that. Talked about the justification for regulation. But please, I would like you to address this point. How is it possible to have a proportionate regulation, an adequate regulation, and still promote scientific development and technological innovation? Because I believe that the two come together. And it's not even possible to have technological innovation out of a framework, a regulation. I don't even believe that's possible. And now what I see, for instance, in the United States with the power of Elon Musk, that scares me a lot. Because everything's going to be possible regardless of the most vulnerable in society, individuals and groups. Because what counts is money and technological power. So I would like you to address a little bit of this topic also. Thank you.
If there are no more questions, I will ask my own. And then because it's very difficult to be here and listen to your presentations and having to keep quiet. I have a very big fault. I am a lawyer, so I'm not talking about the law, but there is a point which interests me a lot, and that is both ethical and an important part of policy making. So the question is for both of you. And it has to do with the idea of accountability in terms of neurotechnology. I think this is an issue we haven't heard a lot of, because if you deep stimulate, you provoke changes, and you have accountability on both sides. If the person stimulated can have disruptions in accountability, and if the person stimulating those are more simple answers, but in terms of what can happen in these sorts of technologies, both the soft stimulation, dreaming with beer, I would dream to something else, but okay. What is the idea in terms of policy making and in terms of ethical principle, which was on the far right of your column, but you didn't have the time to address on accountability. And now I would please first ask Mark to answer following the order of your presentations. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I mean, I think they're all questions that we're grappling with as a committee. So I think, first of all, I would say that there's not a rush to regulate. In fact, that's why we're taking so long to look at the whether there truly are any human rights implications that are novel and new and can't be addressed by existing instruments. I think there are, the GDPR covers some of this, and there are elements of it that may need to be interpreted. And this is the sense I think we got from presentations around the wider data that's maybe arguably not so personal, but it can be aggregated and can be used to discriminate and so on. So I think there are some bigger issues than just data protection on this. But I think the sense that we're discussing really is that you're right, biomedical research is pretty well heavily regulated. There are instruments around discrimination and rights to privacy and so on. But we're trying to work out whether what there needs to be, in the sense of following up from Maria's question, is whether you need to give guidance on this that helps interpretation of it, whether you need to set out broad values and principles that help the good actors to develop their products in a safe way, and also very much not to overlap with the other agencies that are more able to regulate in this area, the medical devices and the medicines and the research ethics committees and so forth. So I think we're kind of trying to navigate a space here and do so in a way that is not just taking one particular technology either. I think it would be very much about the breadth of these interventions into either reading the human mind or writing it, if you like, in that sort of read-write scenario. And then just about the accountability, I think that's a really important point, and it's one of those ones about free will and the ability to say whether you are truly in control of your motor functions or even your cognitive functions if you have some sort of interface there. And that's one that Jeroen would be much better to argue about or a lawyer. I'm not a lawyer, but I think it does lend itself to having this multidisciplinary debate, and also to be able to speak in a mixed audience about terminology that actually people understand. So I think it's really good that you've brought this together. I hope that sort of addresses all the questions in a way. I don't disagree with the gentleman over there as well. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. I don't know where to start from. Probably, first of all, about the rights, I think it's also relevant to say that the Council of Human Rights of the UN also did a study about that, because there was a big question, do we need new human rights, which is a very delicate question, because we don't want to make our system of human rights, the existing one, more fragile, because the world is not, we're not for that. And also they did the study to say we don't need new rights, because we have everything that we have in place covers, but what we need is probably more substance, new institutions, new ways of implementing them to make face face, to be able to face the new challenges. But it's not by creating new rights, because the right of thought, for example, for privacy, those, and among others, those are the one more challenged because of the new technologies, but the rights are there. So I think this is first. The second is, I fully agree that not everything is about legal instruments, and that's why we are working with ethics, because ethics is the two things. It's about the reflection of what is important, and then to see if there is a need for a legislation or not. But there are many issues that that they cannot be solved only by regulation or by a law. And also I also believe that none of us here is thinking only about legal issues, but governance, and governance means many other issues like incentives for governments, the role of civil society, and something that is very close to the mission of UNESCO, which is education. And that's why I mentioned it. I mean, if we invest in educating in ethics in everywhere, then it will not be only about the instances, because those who will regulate it, those who will be thinking about how to deliver the technologies, then they will have that in mind, and then we will need less regulations. I think Kant said that, no? If we need regulations, it's because something is bad. If we need law, something's bad with the ethics, with our morals. So that's why I think the education is really part of it. And I don't think GDPR covers everything, because there are, as we said, a lot of, as Mark also said, there are also a lot of information that is collected that it's not in the medical, so it will not be covered. It will not be considered sensitive. So I'm not too sure. And at the same time, I hope we don't have to overregulate, but I think Europe should not give up, because what we are trying to do in UNESCO is like to try, and I think with other entities like the Council of Europe and others, is to make sure that everybody follows the same example. Because if one company or all the companies have to comply in Europe, they will have to comply everywhere if governments put those regulations in place. So why giving up? On the opposite, let's push for what is happening here to be expanded, at least this one. And last word about legislation, you can see I think with Elon Musk, the very clear difference between ethics and legislation, because and the power and communication, because so many things have happened and we don't know in which conditions. It probably got an approval from FDA in terms of the software. I don't know, I suppose yes, but that's not enough. Where is the scientific communication about what he did with this person? How do we know how it was involved? I mean, we don't know anything. And that's why I think we are speaking about a more comprehensive picture here, and it's not only about new laws. And accountability, super important accountability. I think it's crucial. We started to speak about it with AI. I mean, human rights have to be accountable for human people, regardless. Even if if they wanted to use AI to make a decision in whatever. But even if we don't understand very well how AI works, but if there was a harm, somebody needs to be accountable, and there should be redressal mechanisms. And that is crucial, and that's why it was a principle there. As you said, for those who are developing these technologies and for those who are not necessarily accountable for what they did if they were implanted. Then this is super close also to integrity.
Thank you very much. We have one more question, and then we will end this session if there are no more. So, please.
So, I personally don't like Elon Musk, but I think what he's doing in this area is what needs to be done for devices like this to reach people that need them. So scientists at the universities like the ones where I went to school at and where the science was developed will never reach the point where they will make this an instrument that's accessible to people. The reason why so much of the science that we've been doing in non-invasive brain stimulation does not reach people is because there are no strong industrial partners in it. So I think we need industry. I think we need good industry. And the outcomes are not necessarily scientific publications. I think the outcomes can be others. And I think in the end, I applaud what Elon Musk is doing in Neuralink at this phase, right? I don't know what's going to happen later. He's had 2 people in the trial, so maybe it's not enough yet to publish anything. It's definitely not enough for the FDA to regulate it, but he's doing the clinical trials, he's optimized the technology, and he's taking it forward. If in the end this is a device that costs $40,000 for someone that is unable to do anything to start operating a computer, I think he's a real hero.
If I may, very quickly, because I don't want to prolong this, but I think accessibility is definitely one of the things that we have all agree here that it's needed, and it's no question about it. I think what I meant is that, and of course what we want as end result is not scientific publications. That's not what we want. What we want is impact on the ground. What I meant is that the way of communicating what he's doing is not following a path that we can follow what is happening. So this is what I meant.
Thank you very much. So now we really have to wrap this up because we have to do a timely streaming at 50, and it's now 50, so we have exactly 1 minute to get up and sit down. I always obey my president's instructions, so she said at 50 had to start, so we have to go. Thank you again very, very much.